The void between stars was never truly empty. Zapkel knew this as his crystalline command spire hummed with the pulse of bioluminescent energy, its translucent panels casting eerie teal reflections across his chitinous face. His four jointed fingers traced the holographic display before him, a star map littered with ancient warnings, half eroded by time. The glyphs shimmered in the dim light, their meaning clear despite the millennia since their carving. Beware the sleepers of soul. His second in command, Quilex, shifted beside him, her antennae twitching in unease. The High Synod dismisses these records as myth, she murmured, her voice a whisper of vibrating crystal. They say the Terrans are primitives, violent, yes, but bound to their cradle. Zapkel's mandibles flexed in silent disagreement. The Synod had not seen what he had. The human colony on Kethis Minor had been a test, a simple show of force. Zapirian nanite swarms descending like a glittering blue-green tide, dissolving structures, rewriting matter at the molecular level. The perfect weapon, unstoppable, clean, the first transmission from the surface had been unexpected, not screams, not surrender. Then the sky had burned. Now, as his fleet orbited the scorched husk of Kethis Minor, Zapkel replayed the sensor logs. The humans had no energy shields, no plasma lances, no elegant crystalline matrices of Zapirian design. They had rods, tungsten rods, dropped from orbit. Quilex had scoffed at first. Kinetic weapons? Archaic. A child's toy. Then the first rod struck. No energy signature, no warning, just a streak of silent death, punching through their nanite clouds like a fist through mist. The impact had vaporized an entire spire ship, its delicate lattice collapsing into molten slag. Then another rod fell, and another. Zapkel's carapace still ached where the shockwave had rattled his command throne. The humans had not even aimed at his fleet. They had targeted the planet's crust, triggering seismic ruptures, destabilizing the mantle. A crude, brutal solution: burn the field to kill the locusts. Now, as the last embers of Kethis Minor cooled, Zapkel studied the new data flooding his screens. Deep within the wreckage, his drones had found something. A single Terran transmission buoy, its casing cracked, but still pulsing with a slow, rhythmic signal. Quilex hissed as the decryption completed. It was a message, just 5 words, repeating on loop. You should have read the warnings. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, the sleepers of soul were waking. The message pulsed in Zapkel's mind like a slow, infected wound. You should have read the warnings. His mandibles twitched, the bioluminescent veins beneath his carapace flickering with agitation. The buoy's casing was archaic, centuries old, its alloy composition matching no known Terran design. That alone was impossible. The humans had barely achieved fusion when the Zapirian ascendancy first scouted their system. They should not have had the capability to leave messages buried in the crust of a world light, years away. And yet, here it was. Quilex's spindled fingers danced across the crystalline interface, pulling up fragmented archives from the Ascendance's deep. Memory vaults. The holographic display shimmered, casting jagged blue-green reflections across the command chamber. Ancient records flickered, scraps of intercepted transmissions, half-deciphered warnings from long-dead civilizations. Beware the sleepers. Do not wake the giants. Terra is not what it seems. Zapkel's secondary eyes narrowed. These were not new. The galaxy was littered with the superstitions of extinct species, their paranoia etched into ruins and relay beacons. The Ascendancy had dismissed them as the ramblings of lesser minds. But now, as the wreckage of Kethis Minor smoldered behind them, doubt slithered cold through his thorax. The humans had not fought like a young species. They had fought like something remembering. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Colonel Amanda Cross watched the tactical feed with a stillness that unnerved even her own officers. The Zapirian fleet had been beautiful, crystalline spires wreathed in bioluminescent energy. their formations precise, elegant. Right up until the tungsten rods had torn through them like bullets through stained glass. Captain Evan Chen exhaled sharply beside her. They really didn't know, did they? Cross didn't answer. Her gaze lingered on the debris field, where the last flickers of dying Zapirian energy cores pulsed like fading heartbeats. The aliens had scanned their ships, analyzed their weapons, calculated their odds, and they had missed the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't the rods. It was the patience. Quilek's voice was a thin, reedy hum. Commander, the buoy's origin point. It's not Terran. Zapkel turned. His carapace plates shifting with a sound like grinding stone. Explain. The scientist's frill flushed a sickly violet. The signal structure, it predates their spaceflight era by millennia. And the alloy, a hesitation. It matches the debris patterns found in the dead zones. A cold ripple passed through the chamber. The dead zones were graveyards, systems scoured clean by something the Ascendancy's historians refused to name. Zapkel stared at the buoy's cracked casing. For the first time in his long, victorious life, he felt the weight of a terrible understanding. The warnings had never been about humanity. They had been from them, and the Zapirian Ascendancy had just kicked open a tomb. The silence in the command spire was thick enough to choke on. Zapkel's claws flexed against the smooth crystalline surface of the tactical display, his mind racing through implications like a predator circling wounded prey. The buoy's revelation had unspooled something deep in his instincts, an unease he couldn't shake. The dead zones were myth and nightmare, whispered about in the hushed tones of archivists, and dismissed by the war, cast as relics of some forgotten catastrophe. Yet here was proof, and worse, proof that humanity had been marked by it. Quilek's frill remained a distressed violet, his bioluminescent nodes flickering erratically as he interfaced with the buoy's fractured data core. "Commander," he murmured, mandibles clicking softly, "there's more. The alloy isn't just a match. It's identical to the wreckage in the Krellis expanse." Zapkel's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second. The Krellis expanse was a graveyard of dead stars and shattered fleets, a place where even the Ascendance's scouts dared not linger. And humanity had been there, long before they had reached the stars. A chime from the tactical display shattered his thoughts. The human fleet, what remained of it, was moving. Not retreating as logic dictated, not regrouping. Zapkel's spines flared in disbelief. The Terran vessels were broken things, their hulls scorched and bleeding atmosphere, their formations scattered. Yet they were pushing forward into the teeth of the Ascendance's swarm. "Are they insane?" hissed one of the junior tacticians, his carapace plates rattling. Zapkel didn't answer. He was too busy watching the sensor feeds, his gut tightening with something that felt dangerously like dread. Because the humans weren't just advancing, they were luring. Colonel Amanda Cross exhaled slowly, her fingers resting lightly on the firing console of the Iron Resolve. The ship shuddered around her, a dying beast bleeding coolant and rage in equal measure. "Chen," she said, her voice calm. "Status on the rods." Captain Evan Chen's grin was audible even through the static, laced comms. "Armed and very unhappy, Mom." She didn't smile. There was no room for it, not here, not now. Not when the Zapirians had made their fatal mistake. They'd assumed the rods were the trap. They hadn't realized the fleet was. The Iron Resolve bucked as another plasma lance carved into its flank, the deck plating groaning in protest. Cross didn't flinch. She'd seen worse. They all had. "All ships," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Execute bait protocol." The Zapirian swarm descended like a storm of crystalline knives, their bioluminescent drives painting the void in pulses of electric blue. They moved with the precision of a hive, their formations flawless, their confidence absolute. They didn't see the flicker of movement in the debris field, didn't notice the way the wreckage of human ships shifted, their shattered hulls peeling open like the petals of some grotesque metal flower. And by the time the first Zapirian scout detected the energy surge, it was far too late. The rods weren't just weapons. They were beacons. And something ancient, something hungry, had just heard their call. The void between stars had never felt so alive. Zapkel's command spire pulsed with the rhythmic thrum of bioluminescent energy, the crystalline walls of his flagship resonating with the song of impending victory. His mandibles twitched in satisfaction as the human fleet scattered before his swarm, their crude metal vessels spewing atmosphere and fire. The Terran flagship, Iron Resolve, listed drunkenly, its hull scorched black by plasma lances. Zapkel's secondary eyes flickered with amusement. The humans had fought with the desperation of cornered prey, but their tactics were predictable. Their ships were slow, their weapons crude kinetic slugs and primitive railguns. The Zapirian fleet moved like liquid silver through the battlefield, their crystalline hulls refracting the light of dying stars as they closed in for the kill. Then the wreckage moved. It was subtle at first, a shift in the debris field where none should exist. Shattered human hulls, their jagged edges glinting in the starlight, twisted as if some great hand had reached into the void and rearranged them. Zapkel's primary eyes narrowed, his tactical display flickered, struggling to parse the anomaly. "High Commander," Quilek's voice crackled through the neural link, the scientist's usual calm laced with something unfamiliar, dread. The debris, it's emitting an energy signature, not human, older. Zapkel dismissed the warning with a flick of his antennae. "Scavenger drones. The humans are desperate." But then the first rod ignited. It was a spear of tungsten, 20 meters long, encased in a shell of blackened steel. It had lain dormant among the wreckage, disguised as just another piece of shattered hull. Now it burned, not with fire, with gravity. The rod's surface shimmered, warping space around it like heat haze over desert sands. Then, with a silent scream of distorted physics, it launched. Zapkel's flagship barely had time to register the impact. The rod punched through the crystalline hull like a bullet through glass, its kinetic energy amplified by the gravitational distortion wrapped around it. The Zapirian vessel didn't explode. It unfolded, its organic lattice of living crystal shattering into a million glittering shards as the rod carved through its core. Then the second rod fired, and the third. The debris field erupted, dozens of hidden rods awakening in unison, their blackened shells peeling away to reveal the terrible truth beneath. These weren't just weapons, they were reliquaries. Each rod bore markings, ancient, jagged script, etched into their surfaces, warnings in a language no living being should recognize. And as they burned through the Zapirian fleet, something answered. Deep within the void, where light bent and time frayed, something stirred. Zapkel's remaining ships reeled, their formations collapsing into chaos. His tactical display was a storm of panicked signals, his warriors' minds flooding the neural link with terror. "High Commander," Quilek's voice was raw, his crystalline carapace vibrating with panic. "The readings, they're not human. The rods are calling something." A new presence flickered onto the scanners, not Zapirian, and hungry. Colonel Cross watched from the bridge of the Iron Resolve, her fingers tightening around the armrests of her command throne. The plan had worked. The rods had done their job. Now, the galaxy would remember why Terra's children had been feared, long before they ever reached the stars. The void trembled. Zapkel's crystalline command throne pulsed with erratic energy, its bioluminescent veins flickering as if in warning. His neural feed was a storm of panic, his warriors' thoughts bleeding into his own, their terror corrosive, infectious. The human kinetic rods had done more than shatter his fleet. They had awoken something, and now it was coming. His tactical display fractured, its translucent hexagonal panels glitching as an impossible mass resolved on the edge of sensor range. No ship, no known energy signature, just a distortion, a wound in space itself, swallowing light as it advanced. Quilek's voice crackled through the neural link, his usually precise harmonics warped by static. "High Commander, the beacons. They weren't warnings against the humans. They were warnings about them. Zapkel's secondary eyes twitched. His primary gaze locked on the anomaly. The humans had not simply fired the rods. They had sung with them. The impact vibrations had resonated through dimensions, a frequency older than his species' first breath. And something had heard. Colonel Amanda Cross exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet. The Iron Resolve's bridge was silent, her crew's faces lit by the eerie glow of the tactical hollows. The Zapirian fleet was in disarray, their elegant crystalline warships spinning adrift, their formations broken. But she didn't celebrate. She waited. Captain Evan Chen's voice was tight over the comm. "Colonel, we've got movement." Not ours, she knew. She had always known. The Terran archives had spoken of the sleeping ones, of the ancient things that had once walked the stars before vanishing into the dark. The rods were not just weapons, they were keys. And now, the door was opening. The Zapirian dreadnought Eternal Clarity was the first to die. One moment, it hung in the void, its bioluminescent hull shimmering with defensive energy. The next, something passed through it, a shadow without form, a whisper in the dark. The ship didn't explode, it unraveled, its crystalline structure dissolving into fractal dust, its crew's final screams echoing across the neural net before being severed mid. Thought Zapkel's carapace itched with primal terror. This was not warfare. This was erasure. His warriors' minds clawed at his, their fear a living thing. What is it? He had no answer. Only the humans did. Cross watched the horror unfold with grim satisfaction. The Zapirians had thought themselves masters of the void, their technology superior, their civilization untouchable. But humanity had always known the dark. They had lived in it, fought in it, bred monsters in it, and now the galaxy would learn the same lesson Terra had taught its children. Millennia ago, some doors once opened could never be closed again. The void between stars was never truly silent. Zapkel's command spire pulsed with frantic energy, its crystalline walls thrumming with the distress signals of his dying fleet. The neural net, once a flawless web of shared consciousness, now flickered with jagged gaps where ships and minds had been erased, not destroyed, not defeated, unmade. His secondary limbs trembled as he watched the tactical display. The human vessel designation Thanatos hung motionless against the black, its matte, black hull drinking in the light. No energy signatures, no heat blooms. Just hunger. Quilek's voice slithered through the neural link, his usually precise thoughts fraying at the edges. "Commander, their weapon. It bypasses our shields. It ignores our armor. It doesn't just kill, it consumes." Zapkel's mandibles clenched. He had seen war, had waged it across a dozen systems, crushed lesser species beneath the might of Zapirian crystalline technology. But this was something older, something wrong, a flicker on the display. Another ship, the Luminous Tide, vanished mid-maneuver, its bioluminescent glow snuffed out like a candle in a storm. No debris, no wreckage, just gone. His warriors' terror bled into the neural net, a chorus of primal dread. They were apex predators of the void, born to rule the stars. Yet now they were prey. Aboard the Thanatos, Colonel Amanda Cross exhaled slowly, the faint scent of ozone and gun oil thick in her nostrils. The Zapirians had expected a battle, a clash of titans, their gleaming crystalline dreadnoughts against humanity's brute force kinetics. They hadn't expected this. On her display, the alien fleet scattered like startled fish, their formations dissolving into chaos. She could almost taste their fear. Captain Evan Chen's voice crackled over the comm, tight with adrenaline. "They're breaking, Colonel. They don't know how to fight what they can't see." Cross smirked. Of course they didn't. The Zapirians had built their empire on light, on radiant energy and crystalline perfection. But humanity? Humanity had clawed its way up from the dark, had learned to live in it, to weaponize it. And now, The galaxy's golden children were learning the oldest lesson of all. The dark bites back. She tapped a command into her console. Somewhere in the void, the Thanatos shadow stirred again. The Zapirian command, Nexus, pulsed with frantic energy, its crystalline walls flickering between teal and electric blue as damage reports flooded in. Commander Zapkel's talons scraped against the translucent command console, his bioluminescent veins flaring with stress. The humans weren't just fighting, they were unmaking his fleet. On the holographic display, the Thanatos loomed like a specter, its blackened hull drinking in the light of Zapirian scanners. It shouldn't have been possible. Their nanite swarms, engineered to dissolve metal, to rewrite matter at the molecular level, had skittered harmlessly across its surface, repelled by some unholy alloy the humans had forged in the dark. Quilex, the fleet's lead scientist, stood frozen beside him, his antennae twitching in erratic distress. "The readings make no sense," he murmured, his voice a thin, reedy hum. "Their armor isn't just resistant, it's adaptive, like it learned from our first strike." Zapkel's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a brief, agonized second. He had seen human war records, their crude kinetics, their blunt, forced brutality. But this was something else. This was predation, aboard the Thanatos. Colonel Amanda Cross exhaled slowly, the scent of ozone and gun oil sharp in her lungs. The Zapirians had thrown their best at her ship, glittering clouds of self-replicating nanites, energy lances that could slice through battlecruisers like hot wire through butter. And yet, the Thanatos hadn't just survived, it had laughed. She traced a finger along the tactical display, watching as the alien fleet scrambled to regroup. Their formations, once pristine and geometric, now resembled a shattered stained glass window. "Chen," she said, her voice low. "You seeing this?" On the other end of the comm, Captain Evan Chen's grin was audible. "Oh, I'm seeing it. They're panicking. Their whole playbook's useless." Cross smirked. The Zapirians had built their empire on elegance, on the belief that war could be clean. That victory came from superior technology, from precision. But humanity? Humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of breaking things. She tapped a command into her console. Somewhere in the void, the Thanatos railgun arrays hummed to life, their magnetic coils charging with a subsonic growl. The Zapirians had brought nanites to a fight. Humanity had brought Newton. The first tungsten rod struck the lead Zapirian cruiser at Faye. There was no elegant disintegration, no shimmering cascade of crystalline failure, just raw, unfiltered physics. The impact vaporized half the ship instantly, the shock wave rippling outward in a silent, catastrophic bloom. Secondary explosions tore through the remaining structure, their blue-green energy cores detonating like dying stars. Zapkel's mandibles clicked in horror. This wasn't warfare. This was obliteration. Quilex staggered back from the display, his carapace paling. They reverted us," he whispered. "All our advancements, all our sophistication, and they just threw a rock at us." Zapkel finished, his voice hollow. On the view screen, the Thanatos loomed closer, its shadow stretching across the remnants of his fleet like a predator savoring the hunt. The ancient beacons had warned them. They should have listened. The Zapirian command nexus flickered with emergency lighting, the once pristine blue-green glow now fractured by jagged crimson alerts. Zapkel's claws trembled against the crystalline interface as the tactical display updated in real time, or what passed for real, time when facing weapons that defied reason. The Thanatos wasn't just a ship, it was a monument to human pragmatism, a brutal lesson written in tungsten and relativistic fury. Quilex's antennae twitched erratically as he parsed the data streams. His mind, honed by cycles of flawless predictive algorithms, stuttered. The humans had reduced warfare to its most fundamental equation: mass times acceleration equals annihilation. No elegant nanite swarms, no delicately tuned energy harmonics, just kinetic inevitability. A second rod struck. This one sheared through the luminous tide, the flagship's crystalline spires detonating in a chain reaction that painted the void with electric blue debris. Zapkel's secondary heart seized. That ship had survived the siege of Zira's Maw, had weathered the plasma storms of the drifting reaches. Now it died to a weapon his ancestors might have conceived, had they lacked all artistry, evasive pattern Zeta. 9. Zapkel barked. But the order tasted like ash. Their maneuvers were designed for energy-based combat, graceful arcs meant to disperse plasma or outmaneuver particle beams against rods. Moving at a fraction of light speed, useless. Quilek's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the klaxons. Their targeting systems, they're crude. No quantum locks, no synaptic tracking, just math. He exhaled, the scent of distress pheromones sharp in the recycled air. They calculated our trajectory hours ago. We're not fighting them. We're fighting gravity. On the view screen, the Thanatos advanced, its blocky silhouette, a grotesque parody of Zapirian design philosophy, where their ships flowed like liquid geometry. The human vessel was all right, angles and armored slabs, a hammer to their scalpel. Zapkel's mandibles ground together. The ancient beacons had spoken of Terra's children as those who break equations. Had assumed it metaphor. Now he understood. Humanity didn't solve problems. They shattered them. A third rod lanced out. This time, it missed. For a heartbeat, hope flared in Zapkel's thorax, until the projectile struck the gas giant behind them. The planet's upper atmosphere rippled, a visible shockwave tearing through the clouds. Then the secondary effects hit. EM pulses scrambled their systems, and the Thanatos vanished from sensors. Not destroyed. Hidden Quileks made a sound like a dying reactor. They're using planetary impacts as smokescreens. Zapkel closed his primary eyes. The humans had turned celestial mechanics into a tactical advantage. Of course they had. Somewhere in the void, Colonel Amanda Cross watched her handiwork unfold. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Newton was done talking. The gas giant's atmosphere still churned behind them. Great bands of hydrogen and helium, torn into fractal spirals by the kinetic rod's impact. Zapkel's command spire hummed with emergency power, its crystalline surfaces flickering between teal and sickly gray as the EM pulse washed over them. The Thanatos was gone, not just cloaked, but erased from every sensor, every scan, as if the humans had reached into the fabric of reality and plucked their warship from existence. Quilek's antennae trembled as he parsed the data. His chitinous fingers danced across the luminescent interface, its hexagonal panels pulsing erratically. "They've weaponized celestial mechanics," he murmured, his voice thin with disbelief. That impact wasn't just a smokescreen. It altered the planet's magnetosphere. Our sensors can't penetrate the interference, not without recalibration. Zapkel didn't respond. His secondary eyes tracked the aftermath, the way the gas giant storms now swirled in unnatural patterns, as if the humans had stirred the heavens themselves. The ancient beacons had warned of this. They reshape worlds to fit their needs. He had dismissed it as hyperbole. Now he understood. A proximity alert shrieked. The Thanatos reappeared, not where it had been, but behind them, its angular silhouette blotting out the stars. Its railgun arrays glowed white, hot still cycling from the last shot. Zapkel's blood ran cold. They hadn't just hidden. They had repositioned aboard the Thanatos. Colonel Amanda Cross exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet. The tactical display before her pulsed with red markers, Zapirian interceptors, scrambling to regroup. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. "Chen," she said, her voice calm. "Prep the second volley, rods 3 through 6. Captain Evan Chen's fingers moved before she finished speaking. The Thanatos shuddered as its magnetic coils charged, the air vibrating with pent-up energy. "Coordinates locked," he confirmed. "But Colonel, they're breaking formation. If we fire now..." Cross didn't let him finish. "They think we're aiming for their command spire." Her lips curled, just slightly. Let them. The Zapirian fleet was scattering, their crystalline warships flaring blue, green as they pivoted, their thrusters burning hard to evade the expected strike. They never saw the rods change trajectory mid-flight. The projectiles twisted in the void, their guidance systems overriding inertia, and curved, not toward the fleeing ships, but toward the gas giant's moon. The impact was silent in the vacuum, but its aftermath was anything but. The moon's surface fractured, great plates of ice and rock shearing apart, as the kinetic energy transferred through its core. Then, the debris field erupted outward, a storm of shrapnel moving at orbital velocity. Quilek's scream was barely audible over the alarms. "They're not missing. They're hurting us." Zapkel's claws dug into the command console, his mind racing. The humans hadn't just broken the rules of war. They had rewritten them. And now, his fleet was flying straight into the storm. The gas giant's moon disintegrated in slow, terrible silence. Zapkel's crystalline command throne pulsed with emergency signals as the storm's edge banked hard, its bioluminescent thrusters flaring electric blue against the void. The debris field expanded like a blooming supernova, chunks of ice and rock the size of cities, spinning outward at velocities that turned them into shrapnel storms. His tactical display flickered, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of destruction. They didn't miss. The realization was a blade in his thorax. The humans had never intended to strike his fleet directly. They had aimed for the moon, for the physics of it. A celestial body's mass, its orbit, its velocity, all variables in an equation the Terrans had solved before they ever fired. And now, the solution was unfolding before him. His fleet scattered, their elegant crystalline formations breaking apart as captains veered wildly to avoid the oncoming storm. A Zapirian frigate, the luminous veil, tried to bank starboard, but a spinning slab of ice clipped its engine array. The ship's bioplasmic shields flared once, then shattered like glass. The impact sheared through its living crystal hull, spilling blue-green coolant into the void like blood. Zapkel's mandibles tightened. On the human flagship, Colonel Amanda Cross watched the carnage unfold with the detached precision of a mathematician. Her fingers hovered over the tactical display, tracing the debris field's expansion vectors, right on schedule. The Zapirians had assumed human warfare was brute force, kinetic rods hurled like primitive spears. But this was artillery calculus, a single strike leveraged against celestial mechanics, turning a moon into a weapon. Captain Evan Chen exhaled sharply beside her. "They're not adapting." Cross didn't smile. "They will." Quilek's claws trembled over his console. The science officer's mind raced through the implications, his neural tendrils flickering with frantic calculations. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them, they had outthought them. "High Commander." His voice was a strained hum. "The debris field, it's not random. The trajectories are guided." Zapkel's primary eyes narrowed. "Explain." Quilek pulled up the scan data, his carapace flushing pale. The debris wasn't just expanding, it was shaping itself, funneling the Zapirian fleet into a narrowing corridor. And at the end of that corridor, the human fleet waited. A trap, a mathematical trap. Zapkel's spines flattened against his back. The Terrans hadn't just broken the rules of war, they had weaponized gravity itself, and now his fleet was caught in the equation. The Zapirian flagship Celestial Mandate shuddered as another wave of debris impacted its crystalline shielding. Blue-green energy flared across its hull, the organic circuits beneath the translucent armor pulsing erratically as they struggled to compensate. Inside the war room, the air was thick with the acrid scent of ionized particles and something deeper. Fear. High Commander Zapkel stood motionless before the holographic display, his primary eyes locked onto the unfolding catastrophe. His secondary eyes, however, flickered uncontrollably, betraying the storm beneath his carapace. The humans had not merely outmaneuvered them, They had rewritten the battlefield in real time, turning the void itself into a weapon. Quilex's neural tendrils spasmed as he processed the data streams flooding his console. The debris wasn't just falling, it was orchestrated. Each fragment, each shattered moon chunk, moved with terrifying precision, herding the Zapirian fleet like prey into a slaughterhouse of gravitational eddies. His mandibles twitched. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned chaos into a tactical algorithm. "High Commander," Quilex rasped, his voice modulator crackling with static. "The debris, it's not just guided, it's learning." Zapkel's spine stiffened. "Elaborate." Quilex pulled up a secondary projection, his claws trembling as he overlaid the trajectories. "The patterns, they adjust based on our evasion vectors. The humans must have seeded the field with stealth drones, or," his voice hitched, "or their ships are calculating this live." A cold ripple passed through the war room. The idea was unthinkable. No species, not even the ancient precursors, had ever demonstrated such computational brutality. To manipulate gravity on this scale required not just power but instinct. An understanding of physics so intimate it bordered on blasphemy. Zapkel's gaze flicked to the human fleet, now visible at the terminus of the debris corridor. Their vessels were blocky, inelegant compared to the flowing crystalline beauty of Zapirian design. Yet there was a dreadful purpose to their asymmetry, a lethality carved into every angular plate. And at their center, the indomitable, the Terran flagship hung like an executioner's axe, its railgun arrays humming with pent-up fury. Zapkel's mind raced. This was not a battle. This was a demonstration. On the bridge of the indomitable Colonel Amanda cross-watched the Zapirian fleet struggle against the gravity trap, her expression unreadable. Beside her, Captain Evan Chen exhaled, his fingers dancing over the tactical display. "They're not adapting," he murmured. Cross didn't smile. "They will." Quilex's console flared crimson as another alarm blared through the celestial mandate. The debris field had shifted again, tightening its noose. Escape vectors blinked out one by one as the Zapirian fleet was forced into a single, inescapable approach vector, straight into the teeth of the human guns. Zapkel's claws dug into the command dais. He had studied human history, their wars, their stubborn refusal to surrender even when outmatched. But this was something else. This was calculation married to ferocity. A new alert flashed. The Indomitable's railguns were charging. Quilex looked up, his carapace dull with dread. "High Commander, they're not just destroying us." His voice was hollow. "They're teaching us." The first kinetic round struck before Zapkel could reply. The celestial mandate's shields shattered like glass. The celestial mandate reeled, its crystalline hull groaning under the impact. The kinetic round had not merely pierced, it had unmade. Where the projectile struck, the Zapirian ship's bioluminescent plating flared white, hot before dissolving into a storm of shattered fragments, the elegant geometry of its design collapsing like a sandcastle beneath a tidal wave. Zapkel staggered, his equilibrium disrupted by the ship's violent shudder. His secondary eyes flickered, struggling to process the damage reports flooding his neural feed. The mandate's crystalline power cores, usually pulsing with serene blue-green energy, now flickered erratically, their organic energy flows disrupted by the sheer kinetic brutality of the strike. Quilex's voice cut through the chaos, thin with disbelief. "They didn't use plasma. They didn't use nanites. His voice hitched, "they threw a rock at us." And yet, what a rock it had been. The humans had not merely replicated the crude ballistic weapons of their past. They had refined them into something monstrous. The railgun round had been a tungsten spear, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, wrapped in a sheath of destabilizing harmonics that turned Zapirian shield geometry into a brittle lattice waiting to shatter. It was elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its execution. Zapkel's mandibles clenched. This was not the reckless fury he had expected from Terrans. This was precision. On the tactical display, the Indomitable loomed like a specter, its blocky, angular silhouette, a grotesque mockery of Zapirian design philosophy. Where their ships flowed with organic curves and translucent panels, the human vessel was all brutal edges and reinforced bulkheads, a fortress built for endurance, not beauty. Another alert blared. The Indomitable's railguns were cycling again. Quilek's claws trembled over his console. High Commander, our remaining vessels are attempting to regroup, but the debris field has them trapped. Zapkel finished. He had seen it now. The humans had not just fired blindly, they had herded them, using the wreckage of their own ships as a cage. Every maneuver, every feint, had been a step in a larger equation, one the Zapirians had failed to solve until it was too late. A cold realization settled in his thorax. The ancient beacons had not lied. Terra had slept, and now it was awake. Aboard the Indomitable, Colonel Amanda Cross watched the Zapirian fleet's death throes with grim satisfaction. The enemy ships flared and died like dying stars, their crystalline hulls fracturing under the relentless barrage. Captain Evan Chen exhaled slowly beside her. They never stood a chance. Cross didn't answer immediately. Her gaze lingered on the celestial mandate, its once proud form now, a broken wreck adrift in the void. No, she said at last. But they will remember this, and they would, not as a battle, but as a lesson. The ancient beacons had pulsed their warning for millennia, embedded in the crust of dead worlds, hidden within the ruins of fallen empires. They hummed with a singular message, one the Zapirian ascendancy had dismissed as myth. Their crystalline surfaces, etched with geometric patterns older than their civilization, spoke of a world where giants slept. Commander Zapkel of the Celestial Mandate had seen the records. The warnings were clear. If fragmented, the beacon spoke of a species that had clawed its way from the dirt of its birth world with nothing but teeth and fire. A species that had waged war upon itself with such ferocity that the scars still lingered in its fractured histories. And yet, the High Synod had deemed them irrelevant. Primitives, the Archon had declared, mandibles clicking in dismissal. Their weapons are crude. Their ships, fragile. They have not even mastered luminescent propulsion. Zapkel had not argued. The Ascendancy had never been wrong before. Now, as the Celestial Mandate drifted toward the Sol system, its crystalline hull shimmering with teal energy, he found himself studying the human defenses with clinical detachment. Orbital platforms, blocky and inelegant, hung in lazy orbits. Their weapons were laughable. Ballistic cannons, primitive rail systems, nothing that could pierce Zapirian shielding. Quilek, his chief scientist, had assured him of this. Their technology is stagnant, the scholar had said, his antennae twitching with amusement. They rely on kinetics. No plasma lances, no singularity projectors, just metal. Zapkel had nodded. It made sense. The humans were young. They had not yet learned the elegance of energy-based warfare. Then the first railgun round struck. It came without warning, a tungsten spear hurled at relativistic speeds. The Mandate's shields flared, their bioluminescent barriers straining under the impact. For a heartbeat, Zapkel thought nothing of it. A fluke, a lucky shot, then the second hit, and the third. By the 12th impact, the Mandate's crystalline plating began to fracture. Shields failing. A subordinate shrieked, his carapace vibrating with panic. Zapkel's claws tightened around the command console. This was impossible. Kinetic weapons were supposed to be obsolete. They were slow, predictable, easy to intercept, yet the humans had fired them with terrifying precision. Each round struck the same weakened point, hammering through the Mandate's defenses like a chisel-splitting stone. The Indomitable emerged from behind Luna's shadow. Zapkel's breath caught. It was monstrous, a slab of armored alloy, bristling with cannons and missile pods, its hull scarred from battles the Ascendancy had never witnessed. It moved with deliberate predatory grace, its engines flaring as it positioned itself between the Mandate and Earth. On its prow, painted in fading crimson, a single word. Quilex made a sound like a dying insect. They herded us. Zapkel did not respond. His mind was still reeling from the realization. The humans had let them approach. They had wanted them to see their primitive defenses. And now, as the Indomitable's railguns cycled for another volley, Zapkel understood the truth. The beacons had not lied. The giants of Terra had not been sleeping. They had been waiting. The Indomitable's railguns fired, not at the Mandate, not at its engines, nor its weapons, nor its bridge. The projectiles streaked past, so close Zapkel could have sworn he felt the displaced air scream against the hull. They struck the Mandate's remaining escort vessels instead. Precise, surgical impacts that shattered their crystalline cores in bursts of blue-green fire. The escorts died silently, their remains scattering like broken glass in the void. A message flickered across the Mandate's comms. No demands, no threats, just 3 words, rendered in the cold, efficient script of human-machine. Code, turn, and leave. Quilex's mandibles trembled. They could have killed us. Zapkel stared at the Indomitable, its guns still trained, its engines humming with restrained power. The humans had them in their sights. They had always had them in their sights. They had chosen mercy, not because they were weak, not because they feared retaliation, but because they could. The realization settled over him like the weight of a dead star. The Ascendancy had come to judge these creatures, to measure them against the rigid order of the galaxy and find them wanting. Instead, the humans had measured them and found them small. Zapkel input the command himself. The Mandate's engines flared, its hull groaning as it turned from Terra's light. Behind them, the Indomitable held position, watching, as it had always been, as it would always be.